Hi, welcome back. I'm Vicki York, and we are walking together into fearlessness. There's this false idea, even in the church, that fear is just a part of life. Like that everybody has to put up with and bear their burden when it comes to fear, at least a little bit. If you really look in the Word, it's not our inheritance to live with anxiety and worry and dread and all that other stuff. So because of that mindset, because of that false idea, what we do is we have a very high tolerance sometimes to fear. I'm going to be so bold as to say that there are at least times when fear is a sin. And I think as we kind of look into the subject of fear more and more, you're probably going to agree more and more that, yeah, this can cross over into sin. It really puzzles me why we tolerate fear in a way that we don't tolerate other things. Like, I don't know that we would ever buy into the belief that, well, a little bit of envy is just something every Christian has to deal with, or a little bit of lying, a little bit of lust. We don't insist on thinking that we have to put up with those things, but for some reason we're very, very tolerant of fear. Why does fear get a free pass when other things like pride, envy, greed, slander, gossip, lust, that those things don't seem to get the same free pass that fear does? Why is that? I wish I knew. I've been trying to figure that out for 10 years now. Why? I don't know. I do want to challenge you to just put that mindset aside. Please let go of the idea that you have to live with fear at least to a certain degree. Okay? Now let me interject, because I know some of you are thinking, well, wait a minute, Vicki, if I walk out into my front yard and there's a rattlesnake, I'm going to feel fear, and that could actually be a good thing because it will help me to jump out of the way or run away fast enough to not be bitten and die, right? But here's the thing. Let it be known that I'm not talking about the sort of fear that happens when you round a corner and you see someone standing there with a gun, or you're on a hike and you see a bear. That situational fear that causes your heart rate to go up and your adrenaline to kick in so that you can get out of harm's way. Nobody's talking about that. That's not what I mean. The sort of fear that I'm addressing, that I know that we can be free of as believers, is the kind that keeps you awake at night, or plagues your mind, or causes you to overthink, or work through a scenario from all these different angles, trying to figure out how to make everything better. If you struggle with fear and you look back on the last 3 months of your life, try to add up how many minutes do you think that you had to deal with the sort of fear that you feel when you see that rattlesnake that causes your adrenaline to go into overdrive, or you almost get into an accident and you're like, add up all those moments in the last 3 months. Well, the average person, that's only going to be a couple of minutes, probably. I mean, we don't often run into wild animals. All told, 3 months worth of that kind of fear is only going to add up to a few minutes. However, how much time did you spend in worry about money, feeling anxious about your job, fretting about your spouse or your kids? If your life looks anything like mine did before 2013, that's going to add up to hours and hours and hours. I know that there were days that the vast majority of my day, there was at least an undercurrent of anxiety, just that bzzz undercurrent of constant anxiety, and it's so familiar, sometimes you don't even realize you're feeling it until you're at the end of the day and you realize you haven't taken a deep breath for 16 hours. Day after day, week after week, even month after month, we can live apart from chronic fear. And I want you to believe that, because half the battle is just believing it's possible. Okay, so let me give you a little overview of the day that the Lord showed up and changed my life forever. I just want to give you the backstory because it's kind of interesting, the angle from which the Lord approached this with me. It was I mean, he's so creative, right? He's so creative. 2013, it's early spring, and I'm driving back from Paducah, Kentucky, where I had spent a couple of days with my sister. And as I started driving, I started thinking back on the conversations that my sister, her name is Mimi, she was named Mimi before every grandma in the world was named Mimi. It wasn't a thing back when she was named. But anyway, I was thinking back on conversations that we had had, and it suddenly occurred to me how much I talked about the things in my life that I was afraid of. I mean, I remember literally like just weeping and her handing me tissues because just the fear that was coming out and the anxiety that was coming out while we were talking. And I started to talk to the Lord. I was like, Lord, I've been serving you for a long time now. He had brought me out of areas of fear. I was definitely in a better place than I had been before, but obviously I was still in really not a good place at all when it came to embracing the courage and confidence that should have been mine as a child of God. So I really started to feel convicted about that, and I was talking to the Lord. I was like, Lord, what's up? What's up? I can't believe I still live with so much fear. I can't believe I didn't drive my sister crazy this weekend talking about all this stuff that I'm afraid of. I also suddenly realized that about 95% of the things that I called stressful were related to fear. The stress in my life was actually fear. That's what I started to realize. Well, the Lord answered my prayer very quickly. And I heard him, not an audible voice, but definitely God. And he said, I'm calling you to a 7-day fear fast. For 7 days, you are to renounce all fear in your life. Are you willing to do it? I would never have been able to think of that on my own. So I knew this was God. I know my eyes bugged out at the idea of fasting fear. I had fasted food in the past, so I was familiar with fasting. But the thought of fasting fear was brand new to me. It would be off limits, off the table, like not even an option. Now I'm going to read a quick excerpt out of my book because it actually says it best. Fasting is a sacrifice because we give up something we enjoy, such as TV or sugar or food in general. This is the stuff we crave, sometimes to the point of addiction. When we fast, we forfeit something that's difficult to live without from day to day. But surely no one feels that way about fear, do they? If you suffer from chronic fear, it's very likely that that's exactly how you feel. Fear and I were so entwined that I was nearly addicted to the feeling. I didn't know how to live without fear. In my twisted thinking, I viewed anxiety as something that helped me get through the day. Fear and I were like this. I didn't know where I ended and fear began. So that when the Lord said, I want you to fast fear for 7 days, will you do it? I felt panic and it felt impossible. I thought, well, wait a minute, live apart from fear? Like, how will that happen? I also understood that fasting involves really sometimes wanting what you can't have. I am not one of those really holy people who goes on a fast and doesn't think about French fries and onion rings. I'm the one who will fast, but will also think a lot about stuff like milkshakes, or even stuff I don't even usually eat. I'll start thinking about it. So I knew that fasting fear would probably not be easy at all. But it also kind of took the choice away from me. I hope this makes sense. When you fast food, you forfeit your right to the foods that you want. You forfeit your right to eat and enjoy breakfast and lunch and dinner. It's literally off the table. So I knew that I would be forfeiting my right to indulge in anxiety, because we do have to give our minds to it. I know that sometimes it probably feels like these worrisome thoughts come into your mind and you don't really have much control. There's not much you can do about it, but that's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. So I knew it wouldn't be easy, but there was like this little spark of hope. And I thought, well, maybe it is possible. I know I'd have to choose over and over and over not to go there, but maybe I can do this for 7 days. As the whole idea of being without fear for 7 days really began to sink in, I was badgered by questions like, well, but then how am I going to maintain control over life? How am I going to deal with the uncertainties in life? And I didn't have an answer for that. I didn't know what the next 7 days were going to look like, how I was going to just cope with life without being able to indulge in worry. I mean, it felt like a bungee jump to say yes to the Lord. It felt like jumping off of the edge of a very, very high cliff, but I knew I couldn't say no. I knew that this moment in my life was monumental. Boy, was I right. Absolutely. My life it's just like night and day, that life versus this life. In the past 10 years and the things that the Lord has been able to open up to me just simply because the fear is gone. But there was something inside of me that moment that knew that that was a very, very crucial minute. So I just took a deep breath, and I'll tell you what, I bellowed. I was in my car and I probably looked like a maniac going down the interstate because I was just like, yes, God, yes. And I'm sure there were tears streaming down my face, but the Lord was pleased, and he said, okay, here we go. We start now. I really feel it's that God used that little segment of time, 7 days, so that it wouldn't feel quite so overwhelming to me. I mean, if he had said, we're going to fast fear for the rest of your life, it would have been just so overwhelming. But 7 days of just about anything is doable, right? And probably in the back of my mind, I knew that at the end of the 7 days, it's not like he would say, okay, you can go back to anxiety and fear now. That was good. This was an entire change of life. So that's where we're going to conclude for today. I think what we'll talk about next is 3 significant things that the Lord showed me about really how to fast fear, what fasting fear literally meant. And he showed me these 3 things very, very quickly. Because seriously, I stepped into the fear fast while I was still in my car. It started immediately. It's not that there's some magic 3-step formula or anything to fearlessness. But these 3 things had a really big impact on me. Those next 7 days, they were uncomplicated. The principles that God showed me were simple and straightforward. I remember thinking, why have I never done this before? It doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out, 5-year process to go from chronic fear to living in fearlessness. My prayer for you is that in Jesus' name, you will be so hungry to live in fearlessness that your tolerance for fear will go to 0. You will no longer leave a place for it in your life. Lord, I pray that you will give those who are listening and watching this video the revelation of the truth, which is that fear is not just a part of life. They don't have to live with it. They don't have to be oppressed by it. And they can live in holy confidence and courage and peace and liberty in Jesus' name. That is my prayer for you. Now, if you would just leave a quick comment, just a hello would be great. Just let me know that you're there. Hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell if you would do that for me too. That would be fabulous, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.